Now, the obvious answer to this is to throw Wolverine into the sun or into a black hole. I mean, that's the easiest way to kill pretty much anyone after all. But we're not going to look at this from a viewpoint of someone who has superpowers. We're going to look at this from the viewpoint of a normal human being and the things that a normal human can do. And they're not going to be mega rich, so they can't afford to buy some sort of fancy lightsaber or space-age weapons. Just normal everyday weapons. A person who's not too poor, not too rich. A middle-class assassination of Wolverine. Now, the trick to beating Wolverine is actually quite simple. All you need to do is overload his healing powers, which means you need to hurt him faster than he can heal himself. And the simplest way would be to walk up to him and use an assault rifle, or better yet a railgun, and just empty the clip of bullets into him. You do need a powerful gun though, as a standard handgun won't stop him quick enough. A railgun is perfect, as the force of the bullets wouldn't only rip him to pieces, but it would also knock him down to the floor. And this is not just because they fire bullets with extreme force and extremely quickly, but it's because a lot of these bullets would hit his bone. They would go through his flesh fine, sure, but they can't shoot through adamantium, which means the full force of that bullet will hit Wolverine's bones and knock him backwards. And I mention this because a bullet will rip through a human, sure, but they don't usually throw humans backwards like you see in some TV shows. They just go straight through the flesh, even bone a lot of the time. That does depend how close you are and what the bullets used are, of course, but generally it'll just go straight through you without knocking you backwards. And that is very true of Wolverine. But with a railgun, enough of those bullets will hit bone and throw him down, which is very important. And since Wolverine can't move faster than a bullet, and since his fighting style is to simply pop his claws and then run straight at the enemy as they shoot him, well, that means it's pretty easy to shoot him. I mean, he won't even try to avoid being shot because he knows he can heal from it, so he's not worried. And the only trick to this is to not stop shooting him. Don't shoot him, he goes down, and then go, ah yes, let's celebrate. Don't do that. You just want to load another clip and shoot at him some more. The best way to do this is with two people. One fires like mental. When he runs out of bullets, he reloads, and the other one fires while he does it. And they just switch back and forth when they run out of bullets and need to reload. It's a very simple military technique that's been used for hundreds of years because it's incredibly practical and useful. And that's all you have to do. You just have to shoot him till the clip is empty, then shoot him again and again and again and again. Just keep shooting like mental. It's where a lot of people go wrong. You keep shooting him, and that way he gets so overloaded with his healing powers that he'll be unconscious for a long time. He'll basically just be a pool of Wolverine on the floor, and that's important because you need him to be unconscious. You need this so you can safely walk up to him. Now, it's hard to say when that will occur, obviously. When is he unconscious enough? You don't know. He could just heal suddenly and stab you. That's why you have to keep shooting him till he's just a bunch of blood on the floor. And some of you are probably thinking, why not just set fire to his body? And I get where you're coming from, but in the past his healing factor has actually been sped up by fire, so he might actually heal even faster, so I'd advise against it. And it's not necessary because the bullets will work. So you've shot him so much that he's basically a corpse on the floor, and then you walk up to him, you stick a knife through his eye, just an ordinary kitchen knife will do, doesn't have to be anything fancy, and then you push it through the eye socket into his brain, and then you do it to the other eye, so he's got two knives inside his brain. This means that he's effectively dead, because until those knives are removed, he's not going to be able to think. Now his healing factor will push them out, so you want to gaffer tape around them so that they can't come out. And this way, he just can't heal out of this situation. And the truth is, if you want, you could just leave him like this or bury him somewhere. I mean, that's pretty much it. His powers might keep him alive, just about, but they won't be able to heal it because they just can't push through the force of that gaffer tape. It seems so simple, but, well, it is simple. That's all you need to do. But of course, there is another way of making sure he definitely can't come back, because in theory he could, because his body is still relatively in one piece. And I do mean in one piece. You see, a lot of people think that he's indestructible thanks to his adamantium skeleton. But the truth is, this just means that his bones are indestructible. But his flesh, on the other hand, well, that can very much be hurt, which in turn means his limbs can be removed. This is because, like all humans, his bones are held together by flesh, muscles, and tendons. So, if you take his arm out of the joint, you could cut it off his shoulder. And the same is true of his legs and his knees, his hands, his elbows, basically all the joints. Bones are a strong structure that our bodies are built around. But the bones don't actually hold us together, flesh does, in the form of ligaments and muscles. And with his healing factor, that's pretty impressive. But if Wolverine is incapacitated, you could take his entire body apart with relative ease. Always remember, the trick to taking someone down is to focus on their weaknesses, not their strengths. And Wolverine has the strongest bones, but the flesh is in no way stronger than a regular human. It just heals fast, so you can still cut it off. And I will just quickly say, for those thinking this isn't true, remember, the bones are coated in adamantium, true, but they're not held together by adamantium, because if they were, Wolverine wouldn't be able to move his joints, he wouldn't be able to walk, the metal would fuse them in place, so they have to be separate. That's just a fact. And though cutting through muscles that instantly heal themselves is difficult, it's not impossible. But this still doesn't kill Wolverine, even if you separate him, because his body can still regenerate. In fact, in one case, his flesh was actually burnt from his bones. He was just a metal skeleton. But thanks to just a few cells being not burnt off, he was able to regrow his entire body. But fire is the right idea. The best way to dispose of his body is by using heat. Now, you could put his body into a cremator and burn the flesh into ash. But again, a few cells could potentially remain. I mean, that's ridiculous, but remember, he does have the adamantium skeleton. And what I mean by that is, normally a cremator burns hotter than 800 degrees Celsius, because that's the temperature when a human's bones will turn to ash. Obviously, this wouldn't work on adamantium, and this adamantium does provide protection for some cells that are inside the bones. We actually have a lot of cells inside our bones, so the cremator may not be able to get rid of all of them. It's not impossible for the fire to reach them, but it's a risk. And why take a risk? As I've said before, fire has been known to cause Wolverine's healing powers to accelerate in response to the fire, so this could inadvertently cause him to regenerate quickly. And most importantly, there's another, better way to dispose of him. And that is to simply dump his body into molten metal. Simply go to a smelting factory and dump the body inside a vat of molten metal. Now, I know I said this method of killing was for the average man's means, but even an average man should be able to save up enough to bribe someone to get into a factory, or, just break in. Still, this part is a bit of a stretch, I will admit, but it's still a good way to get rid of him. Basically, the metal will destroy any flesh it comes into contact with, and better still, when the metal cools down, the body will be encased inside of solid steel, which means it will not be able to move even if he was able to heal himself somehow. But you have to make sure to remove both his arms. After all, if somehow he managed to heal mid through this process, you could pop his claws and cut through the metal. Honestly, it probably wouldn't work, and it's a bit ridiculous, but to be absolutely certain, take his body apart, put each of the limbs in different vats of metal, and then dump them somewhere random. Just bury them in the ground, and that is that. Of course, maybe someone could cut him out one day, and maybe his healing factor would regenerate his body, but if you do dump him in random places, it is unlikely even his allies would be able to find him. I mean, if you were to take the body and publicly display it in a way of boasting, look, I've killed Wolverine, I'm awesome, then yeah, it's pretty possible someone will recover it one day. But if his body is buried in secret locations, and his body is dismembered and encased in solid steel, well, it's unlikely he could ever be recovered. I mean, to my mind, this is definitely the best way to get rid of him. You've basically killed him and made sure he can't return. Now, I do want to say that usually the healing starts around his brainstem. Not always, I know, but usually. So the biggest threat in this is the head healing a new body. And the best way to combat this would be to take those ordinary kitchen knives and change them with something else. Something with a high melting point like titanium. After all, molten steel melts at a temperature of around 1370 degrees Celsius, whereas titanium's melting point is 1725. That's almost a 400 degree difference. So the titanium knives would be just fine. Just have to make sure they stay in his brain. Obviously the gaffer tape would be destroyed, so you'd have to make sure that these knives go in the long way, turn them sideways so the body can't push him out, and thus he is doomed. I mean, you could just stuff it with titanium if you wanted, it don't have to be knives. But the point being, that is the best way to make sure his brain doesn't regenerate. Because this idea that I'm coming out with here is not just about killing him, it's about making sure he stays dead. That's the important part. A lot of people have killed Wolverine, but no one's really been able to make it stick. And thus, Wolverine is dead in a very simplistic way that would undoubtedly work. Now, I know this is just my idea on how to kill the man, and you may disagree with me, so please let me know in the comments if you think there is some big flaw in this plan. And if you do disagree, do say the reason why, because I want people to use logic on this, otherwise, why bother to comment? Now, I will admit there is the flaw that Wolverine has to be on his own, otherwise this plan wouldn't really go smoothly, but he's often alone. I mean, you can account for this. He's often out getting drunk on his own, and if he's drunk, it'd be even easier to take him out. Although it'd be pretty easy to shoot him if he's sober. After all, he doesn't even bother to dodge bullets. That arrogance is a really big weakness. It's why this whole plan would work. But still, let us know if you disagree, and more importantly, let us know if you have a better way of killing Wolverine, because I'm sure we've all come up with ways of killing him over the years, and I'd love to hear what your theories on how you beat his healing factor are. And I'd just like to quickly remind everyone that we have some merchandise available on our store, and to say thanks to all of you who have donated to the Needle Mouse Productions page on Patreon. And as always, thanks for watching, and feel free to subscribe, share, like, and comment.